A labyrinthine palace feels perfectly connected, yet it was built thousands of years ago. This is the power of ancient spatial intelligence. By the end of this exploration, you will see the built world around you through an entirely new lens. How did architects plan vast multi-room complexes without computers or blueprints? What hidden stories are written into the very floor plans of forgotten cities? We will uncover the silent language of walls and pathways, from the palaces of Crete to the cities of the Indus Valley, revealing the profound cognitive and cultural blueprints embedded in stone. This journey challenges our modern assumptions about progress, offering timeless insights into human organization and our relationship with the environment. What do you think it truly means to design a space for living? That cognitive map begins with a simple, profound question. What does it truly mean to think in 3 dimensions for a society that has never seen an architectural blueprint? For ancient builders, spatial intelligence was not a separate skill, but the very fabric of their problem-solving. It was the capacity to hold an entire community's rhythm in one's mind, the path of a water carrier at dawn, the gathering of elders at dusk, the solemn procession of a festival, and then to translate those flowing patterns into fixed walls and doorways. This was foresight carved in stone. An expert in the archaeology of households, Dr. Lisa, offers a crucial insight. She points out that this form of intelligence was never purely technical. It was deeply inherently cultural. The layout of a home, a temple, or an entire city was a physical argument about how the world should work. It communicated hierarchy, it enforced social rules, it made cosmology walkable. A doorway wasn't just an opening, it was a statement about who was welcome. A storage room placed far from an outer gate wasn't just practical, it was a silent lesson in security and trust. This transforms how we see these silent ruins. We stop viewing them as just old buildings, as collections of rooms where people once lived. Instead, we begin to read them as sophisticated spatial texts. Every corridor is a sentence. Every courtyard is a paragraph. The entire complex is a story written not in ink but in and footsteps. To understand this story, we must learn its grammar, the fundamental planning principles these ancient architects used. And to do that, we must travel to one of the most compelling and mysterious examples of this intelligence in action, a place where the very walls seem to whisper of a lost and intricate logic. This invisible architecture of the mind is perhaps the greatest marvel of all. To build a city, you must first hold it, complete and whole, within your thoughts. Long before any foundation trench was dug, ancient planners engaged in a profound act of cognitive creation. They visualized entire complexes, every room, every passage, every supporting wall in the mind's eye. This was not vague daydreaming. It was a disciplined, sophisticated form of mental modeling, a detailed rehearsal of space and structure. Without the crutch of paper blueprints, how was this possible? The answer lies in a toolkit of memory and tradition. Master builders likely used memory techniques, passing down precise spatial sequences through oral tradition, much like an epic poem. They may have sketched rudimentary diagrams in wet clay or smooth sand, not as final plans, but as shared focal points for discussion. Consider the builders of Neolithic, a vast settlement in what is now Turkey. For centuries, they replicated house layouts with a consistency that feels almost uncanny. Each home was entered through the roof, with a main living area, platforms for rest, and specific spaces for domestic activities. This was not random. It points to a powerful shared mental template, a cognitive blueprint so deeply ingrained it guided construction for generations. The feat is staggering. To mentally model a multi-room structure, you must hold and manipulate vast amounts of data. You must consider room functions and how they relate. You must anticipate the flow of people and goods, the traffic patterns of daily life. You must calculate structural loads, understanding intuitively which walls are bearing weight and which are merely partitions. All of this was done internally, a silent calculus of space and force. This intelligence was honed by sheer necessity, in a world where a major error could mean collapse, wasted years of labor, or the loss of precious resources. To understand this invisible pre-construction phase is to see ruins in a new light. The silent stones we walk among are not just the end product of physical labor. They are the physical echo of a profound mental discipline. They are thoughts made solid. This cognitive rigor hints at entire schools of thought, entire ways of training the human mind that have been lost to time. We are only beginning to appreciate the depth of this ancient intellect. And once this mental model was, It had to be translated from imagination into the messy reality of the landscape. This required another layer of genius, a way to anchor thought to earth without modern instruments. The translation from mental model to physical reality began with a single, unwavering line drawn across the landscape. This was the first act of spatial intelligence made visible, and it reached for the heavens. Ancient architects across the world shared a foundational principle: orientation to the cosmos. Before a single room was plotted, the entire site was aligned with celestial bodies or the cardinal directions. This practice provided a sacred and unshakable grid for all subsequent planning. Think of it as the first stroke on a vast, invisible canvas. At the Palace of Knossos in Crete, certain corridors and central courts are aligned so that the rising sun on the solstices would pour light down specific axes, illuminating ceremonial spaces. Far away in India, the magnificent Sun Temple was designed as a colossal stone chariot, its entire form and internal progression oriented to capture the sun's rays in a precise, dramatic sequence. This was far more than symbolic decoration. As Dr. explains, these alignments functioned as a celestial blueprint. They established fixed, non-negotiable lines of power and order upon the earth. Once that primary north-south or east-west axis was set, everything else fell into place around it. This cosmic framework dictated where the grandest halls would be placed, often along the primary solar or stellar path. It determined the placement of light wells and courtyards, ensuring that vital sunlight or meaningful shadows would enter at specific, significant times of the year or day. It even influenced social hierarchy, as spaces closest to these powerful celestial axes were often reserved for the most important rituals or individuals. The architecture became a living calendar and a map of the cosmos. By weaving astronomy directly into the floor plan, these builders ensured that the daily experience of moving through a palace or temple was a constant, subtle reinforcement of a larger cosmic order. The sun itself became an architect, dictating the flow of light and, by extension, the flow of human activity. With this celestial grid firmly established, the planners then faced their next monumental task: organizing the chaos of daily life within that perfect cosmic order. Within that celestial framework, the builders then faced the human element. The sun may have set the stage, but people would bring the story to life, a story with a strict social script. This brings us to the second principle of ancient spatial intelligence: hierarchical zoning. These architects understood that space is never neutral. It is a powerful tool for organizing society itself. A floor plan could dictate who you met, what you saw, and how you behaved, all without a single spoken command. Consider the vast palaces of the Assyrian Empire. A visitor would not simply walk into the king's presence. Their journey was a carefully choreographed descent into privilege. It began in bustling, sun-drenched outer courtyards, spaces open to merchants, soldiers, and lower officials. From there, you might be led through a series of increasingly ornate gateways, each transition marked by colossal guardian figures. The rooms grew smaller, the ceilings lower, the light more controlled. You moved from public receiving halls to administrative chambers where scribes worked, and finally, after many checks, you might reach the innermost suite, the king's private quarters and throne room. This was not just a fancy layout. This was a spatial narrative of power. Every step inward was a demonstration of your rising status, or a reminder of the immense gap between you and the ultimate authority. The architecture managed visibility. A visiting envoy would see only what the kingdom wanted him to see. It controlled movement, funneling people along approved pathways. Most profoundly, it reinforced social stratification daily. A servant knew their place literally because their tasks kept them in the service zones. A noble understood their access, defined by which doors they could pass through. The building itself was a silent, stone administrator, enforcing a code of conduct long before such rules were fully written down. We can read this social map today by studying the floor plans. The large, accessible rooms near entrances often point to public or bureaucratic functions. The smaller, interconnected suites deeper inside suggest private family life or secluded ritual. A single, well-defended room at the heart of the complex speaks of a ruler's need for security and seclusion. This zoning reveals a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social control. It shows that ancient planners were not just designing shelters, they were designing experiences meant to shape thought and behavior. They used walls and doorways to create a lived hierarchy, making the social order tangible, walkable, and inescapable. But a palace or a temple is more than a diagram of power. It is a living system that must function, where people work, eat, store goods, and move about their daily lives. This required a third, brilliantly pragmatic layer of planning, one that dealt with the unglamorous yet vital flow of practical necessities. The silent administrator of hierarchy then needed a way to move people through its carefully ordered zones. This brings us to the third principle of ancient spatial intelligence and processional pathways. If hierarchical zoning was the social map, was the directed journey. It is the deliberate, powerful use of a central line, a spine, upon which the entire experience of a place is built. Think of it not as a simple hallway, but as the narrative backbone of the architecture itself. The most breathtaking example is perhaps the Grand Avenue leading to the Temple of Karnak in Egypt. This was not a street, it was a stage. Lined with hundreds of Sphinx statues, it created a mile-long corridor of awe, a physical and psychological funnel directing every pilgrim's gaze and footsteps toward the towering temple gates at the far end. The approach was everything. The pathway controlled the speed of your approach, it dictated what you saw, and it built anticipation with every single step. This principle of organized everything. Subsidiary rooms, courtyards, and monuments were arranged symmetrically or asymmetrically along this powerful central line, creating a rhythm of spaces, a visual and physical cadence. In a Roman villa, the precise north-south axis, often running from the main entrance through a central courtyard and into the most important reception room, did the same thing on a domestic scale. It provided an immediate, intuitive understanding of the house's layout. You entered, you saw the axis, and you understood the logic of the place. This genius lies in the control of revelation. Vistas were not left to chance. A doorway would be perfectly framed at the end of a colonnade. A statue of a god or an emperor would be revealed only after you turned a specific corner. The architecture was choreographing your attention, creating moments of drama and significance. For a religious pilgrim, this transformed a visit into a spiritual narrative, a walk from the profane world outside toward the sacred heart within. For a household member or a guest, it created a clear, dignified sequence from public welcome to private audience. This advanced understanding of spatial sequencing shows that ancient architects were masters of experience design. They knew that how you move through a space is as important as the space itself. They used stone and line to guide emotion, to build meaning, and to tell a story without a single written word. The axial pathway gave a sprawling complex a single unifying breath, but a building must also breathe in a literal sense. It must manage light, air, sound, and the practical flow of daily necessities. This required a fourth, deeply pragmatic layer of intelligence, one that dealt with the invisible systems that made these stone giants truly livable. That choreographed journey of light and procession was built from countless individual parts. To create such vast, reliable complexes, ancient planners mastered a fourth principle: modular design. They understood that true architectural genius could be found in simplicity and repetition. Rather than designing every room as a unique challenge, they developed standardized units, like building blocks, that could be endlessly combined. This was the key to efficient, large-scale construction, a form of ancient prefabrication that allowed cities to rise with remarkable consistency. Nowhere is this more evident than in the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley civilization. At sites like Mohenjo-Daro, you find a stunning uniformity. Bricks were fired to standardized ratios, their dimensions so consistent they suggest a widespread system of measurement. Entire neighborhoods were composed of repeating room blocks, with houses often sharing walls and following similar internal layouts. This was not a sign of a lack of creativity, but of a profound, pragmatic intelligence. By perfecting a single module, a standard room size, a perfect brick, a reliable drainage channel, the entire society could scale up its ambitions. A master planner in one city could communicate a design to a builder in another, confident they were working from the same spatial vocabulary. This modularity solved immense practical problems. It allowed for rapid, reproducible construction, as craftsmen became specialists in repeating a set of perfected tasks. It enabled easy expansion. A growing family could add another standardized room block, or a city could extend its grid with predictable ease. Most fascinatingly, it implies a deep mathematical spatial intelligence. Standardized units require agreed-upon measurements and an understanding of ratio and proportion. The consistent footprint of an Indus Valley house tells us that someone, thousands of years ago, had calculated the ideal dimensions for a family's living space and then encoded that knowledge into the culture's building practice. Think of it like a powerful physical algorithm. The module was the core instruction. Repeat it, combine it, rotate it, and you generate immense complexity from perfect simplicity. This principle resonates powerfully with our modern world, from the interchangeable parts of an assembly line to the modular code of computer software. It reveals a timeless truth about managing complexity, whether in stone or in systems. But a building made of perfect modules is still just a shell. The final, and perhaps most vital, layer of ancient spatial intelligence was what brought that shell to life, a hidden network of systems that managed the very essence of a living community. Those perfect modular blocks were then shaped by an even greater force, the environment itself. This brings us to the fifth, and perhaps most elegantly pragmatic principle of ancient spatial intelligence: environmental integration and climate control. The true test of a multi-room complex was not just how it looked, but how it felt to live inside through the scorching heat of summer and the chill of winter, all without a single mechanical device. Ancient architects were masterful engineers, weaving their structures directly into the local landscape to create natural comfort. Consider the breathtaking cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde in the American Southwest. Built into massive sandstone alcoves, these were not random choices. The deep overhangs provided essential shade during the intense summer sun, while the rock face itself acted as a thermal mass, absorbing warmth during the day and slowly releasing it during the cool desert nights. The positioning of rooms within the alcove was a careful calculation of light and temperature, a passive solar design carved from the living earth. Half a world away, Roman engineers demonstrated a different but equally brilliant approach with the hypocaust system. This was an underfloor heating network where hot air from a furnace would circulate beneath the tiled floors of bathhouses and wealthy villas, creating a radiant warmth that rose evenly through the rooms. But beyond such technological feats, the everyday Roman villa displayed a subtle genius for airflow. Central courtyards, or atriums, were not just for beauty. They functioned as climate engines. Open to the sky, they would draw cooler air in through surrounding rooms, creating a natural cross-ventilation that flushed out stale air and reduced humidity. This required an intimate, almost poetic understanding of natural patterns. Builders had to track the sun's path across the sky throughout the year. They needed to know the direction of the prevailing winds in every season. This knowledge was then translated directly into the floor plan. Storage rooms for grain or oil were consistently placed on the cooler, northern side of a building to preserve their contents. Main living and gathering spaces were oriented to catch the low, warming rays of the winter sun, while being shaded from the harsh, high summer sun by strategic overhangs or colonnades. Even window placement was a science, designed to maximize light when needed and minimize heat gain when it was not. This was sustainable design in its form. The architecture itself became a responsive filter between the inhabitants and the elements. It highlights a spatial intelligence that listened to the land and the sky, that saw environmental constraints not as obstacles, but as the very materials of creation. The building did not fight its place in the world, it collaborated with it, resulting in structures that were inherently energy efficient and profoundly harmonious. This deep integration suggests a final, overarching question. If these 5 principles, cognitive modeling, celestial orientation, hierarchical zoning, axial pathways, and environmental integration, represent such a sophisticated system, why did this particular form of large-scale, coordinated planning seemingly fade from some parts of the world? What happened to this intricate language of stone? The true measure of this intelligence is not in its principles, but in its practice. To see them woven together, we must walk the storied corridors of a single, magnificent place. The Palace of Knossos on Crete does not present itself as a tidy blueprint. At first glance, its sprawling footprint of over 1,000 rooms seems like a bewildering maze, a chaotic jumble of walls that perfectly birthed the legend of the labyrinth. But that is the illusion. This apparent chaos is, in fact, a breathtakingly sophisticated. Knossos is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a spatial argument to be understood, a physical manifesto of Minoan civilization. Every twist and turn was deliberate. The palace's layout was a meticulously engineered machine designed to manage every aspect of life, from the sacred to the supremely practical. It functioned as the absolute center of the world for its people, the political command center, the economic engine, and the spiritual heart, all operating in one interconnected organism of stone and plaster. To move through Knossos was to participate in a carefully scripted performance of power, piety, and community. So how did this architectural machine actually work? Let us decode its genius, starting with the most fundamental division, the separation of a kingdom's many lives. The planners of Knossos executed hierarchical zoning with stunning clarity. They allocated distinct, specialized quarters for the palace's varied functions, creating a city within a building. Vast, multi-story magazines, long rows of storage rooms lined the western side. Here, giant ceramic jars called pithy held the wealth of the realm: olive oil, grain, and wine, the economic lifeblood. Nearby were the administrative offices, where scribes kept records on clay tablets using the still undeciphered linear, a script. The craftsmen's quarters, with workshops for pottery, stone vase making, and intricate fresco painting, were situated in their own zones. And then, secluded and accessed through more controlled pathways, were the royal apartments and the most sacred spaces. This was not just about putting things in different rooms. It was about creating a social and functional geography. A farmer delivering tribute would never need to wander into a ritual space. A priest's path would cross with an administrator's only at designated points. The architecture silently enforced a complex social order, ensuring that the sacred remained separate from the profane, that commerce did not interfere with ceremony, and that the royal family maintained both visibility and seclusion. This intricate social map needed a central organizing principle, a spine to give it order. That spine was the great central court. This vast rectangular plaza was the primary axis, the beating heart of the entire complex. Everything revolved around it, both literally and symbolically. It was the stage for the most important public ceremonies, the bull-leaping rituals that were central to Minoan culture and likely fed the myth of the Minotaur. But its role was more than ceremonial. The court functioned as the main circulatory hub. From it, a network of corridors branched out like arteries, connecting all the specialized zones. Some corridors were broad and processional, designed for grand public movement. Others were narrow, twisting, and deliberately confusing, controlling access to the more private royal and religious quarters. This is where the legend of the labyrinth finds its roots in stone. These labyrinthine passages were not a design flaw, they were a brilliant security and social filter. They prevented direct, unmediated access, creating a journey that heightened the significance of reaching the inner sanctums. The very architecture created a sense of mystery and awe, transforming a simple walk into a ritual of approach. Yet, for all its grandeur, the palace was also a living, breathing, adaptable space. The Minoans were masters of environmental and functional flexibility. They employed clever light wells, open shafts that brought sunlight and fresh air deep into the interior rooms, combating dampness and darkness. Even more ingenious were their piran-door partitions, walls made of a series of door panels that could be opened or closed to reconfigure a room's size and function instantly. A large hall for a feast could be subdivided into smaller private suites. Ventilation could be directed, and spaces could be transformed to suit the season or the occasion. This modular flexibility allowed the static stone structure to respond dynamically to the needs of its inhabitants. Finally, all of this design served a relentless, efficient flow. The layout facilitated the smooth movement of goods from the storage magazines to the workshops and out to the wider world. It managed the daily traffic of hundreds, perhaps thousands of people, from servants and artisans to officials and priests, ensuring they could all perform their duties without chaotic intersection. Analyzing Knossos reveals the ultimate integration. Here is not a stark line but a vibrant plaza. Zoning is not rigid segregation but interconnected specialization. Modularity is found in the adaptable rooms, and environmental control is woven into the very fabric of the walls. The palace was a single, dynamic system, a testament to a spatial intelligence that could hold an entire civilization's complexity in mind and translate it into a living, functioning, and awe-inspiring home. It stands as a powerful reminder that what we might first perceive as ancient chaos is often just a logic we have forgotten how to read. Yet beneath the visible choreography of processions and practicality lay a hidden layer of order, a silent mathematics governing the stones. The planners of antiquity often infused their work with sacred geometry, a system of mathematical ratios believed to echo the very structure of the cosmos. This was not merely about aesthetics, it was about encoding meaning into the very proportions of a space, connecting the act of building to a grander, divine blueprint. Think of it as a secret language, one where numbers held power and harmony was a spiritual principle. You can witness this in the serene dimensions of a classical Greek temple. The relationship between the width of its to its height, or the spacing of its columns, often follows precise ratios like the golden ratio, a proportion found throughout nature, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. For the Greeks, this mathematical harmony, this was a reflection of cosmic balance and reason. The temple was not just a house for a god, it was a physical manifestation of divine logic, an offering of perfect order. Similarly, in the solemn depths of Egyptian tomb design, room layouts and passage lengths were frequently based on Pythagorean triangles or other significant numerical sequences. A chamber's dimensions might correlate to mythological numbers or celestial cycles, turning the journey to the afterlife into a walk through a sacred equation. This use of proportional systems provided a foolproof framework for beauty and balance. It ensured that a building, regardless of its size or the skill of individual masons, would possess an inherent, almost musical harmony. More profoundly, it imbued architecture with symbolic resonance. When a community gathered in a space whose proportions were tied to the movements of the stars or the stories of their gods, they were literally standing inside a representation of their worldview. The architecture became a teacher, a constant, subtle reinforcement of a cosmic order. This layer of spatial intelligence reveals a breathtaking ambition. It shows that ancient builders sought to do far more than create shelter or enforce social rules. They aimed to build philosophy. They sought to make the invisible principles of the universe tangible, to craft environments that were spiritually potent and intellectually satisfying. The stones were arranged according to a logic that connected the mundane task of daily living to the divine patterns of creation. It was a profound attempt to build heaven on earth, using geometry as the translator. This silent language of numbers and ratios suggests that for these cultures, beauty and truth were not separate pursuits, but two sides of the same measured stone. But what happens when that sacred geometry is applied not just to a single temple, but to an entire civilization? We find an answer not in the winding corridors of a palace, but in the stark, silent streets of a city that seems to defy its own age. Mohenjo-Daro, rising from the plains of the Indus Valley over 4,000 years ago, presents a spatial intelligence of an entirely different character. Here, the genius is not expressed through labyrinthine mystery or celestial drama, but through something almost modern in its clarity, a relentless, gridded precision. This was a city built not from the center out, but from the ground up according to a master plan. Before a single house was constructed, someone envisioned the entire urban organism and laid down its immutable skeleton, a precise grid of wide, straight streets running north-south and east-west. This was not a layout that grew organically from winding footpaths. It was a conscious imposition of order upon the landscape, a declaration that human habitation could be rational, clean, and supremely efficient. The scale of this foresight is staggering. This grid system organized hundreds of acres, dividing the city into large blocks, which were then subdivided by smaller lanes. The primary streets were wide enough for carts to pass, while the smaller lanes provided access to individual homes. This created a hierarchical circulation network that managed the flow of people and goods with an efficiency that would not be seen again in urban planning for. This top-down logic extended to the very materials of the city. The builders of Mohenjo-Daro employed standardized, kiln-fired bricks in consistent ratios. Whether you were in a wealthy merchant's house or a more modest dwelling, the bricks were the same size. This uniformity speaks of a centralized authority or a deeply ingrained cultural standard that governed construction. It allowed for rapid, reproducible building and made repairs and additions seamless. The entire city was built from the same set of perfect, interchangeable parts. That systemic order reached its most brilliant expression in what you cannot easily see, the infrastructure beneath the streets. Mohenjo-Daro boasted one of the world's first comprehensive urban sanitation systems. Almost every house had a dedicated bathing area with a water-resistant floor and a drain. These private drains fed into a network of brick-lined sewers that ran beneath the main streets, covered with stone slabs for easy maintenance. There were public wells for fresh water and simple, effective rubbish bins throughout the city. This was not a luxury for the elite, it was a standard feature of urban life. The spatial intelligence here is profoundly pragmatic and collective. It prioritized public health and civic cleanliness on a scale that reveals a society deeply concerned with the well-being of its entire community. So what was life like inside this meticulously planned machine? Individual houses, often 2 stories high, were inward-focused. They presented blank, windowless walls to the street, with a single doorway leading inside. Privacy and security were built into the very. Once inside, you would typically find a central courtyard, the heart of the home, with rooms arranged around it. Multi-room layouts included spaces for cooking, sleeping, and craftwork. The courtyard provided light and air and often contained a private well. This design created a cool, quiet refuge from the bustling city outside. The house was a private world, yet it plugged perfectly into the public utilities of the city. Your drain connected to the city sewer. Your waste went into the municipal bin. Your water likely came from a public source. The domestic sphere and the civic infrastructure were designed as one integrated system. This leads us to the most compelling mystery of Mohenjo-Daro. The city's layout shows a remarkable lack of obvious monumental palaces or temples that clearly dominate the skyline. There are large structures like the Great Bath, which may have had a ritual purpose, and a massive raised platform known as the Citadel. But the overall impression is one of startling uniformity and access. The best drainage, the widest streets, the clean water, these were not reserved for a tiny elite in a fortified compound. They were shared civic goods. This suggests a spatial intelligence geared towards stability, predictability, and perhaps a more collective social ideal. The city itself, through its plan, enforced a kind of egalitarianism of infrastructure. It used space not to glorify a single ruler, but to sustain an entire urban population in health and order. Standing in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, you are not struck by awe for a god-king, but by respect for the anonymous planners. Their legacy is a lesson in the power of systemic thought. They prove that spatial intelligence can be a force for serene, sanitary, and sustainable urban life. They built a machine for living that hummed with quiet efficiency for centuries, a testament to the idea that the greatest architectural marvel might not be a towering pyramid, but a perfectly functioning, unseen drain. Yet the silent stones of Mohenjo-Daro held another kind of intelligence, one that speaks not to the eye but to the ear. Beyond the visible geometry of streets and rooms, ancient architects mastered a hidden dimension of space, the intentional shaping of sound itself. This acoustic planning is one of their most subtle and astounding achievements. In a world without electronic amplification, they learned to build environments that could whisper secrets across vast distances or fill a sacred chamber with otherworldly resonance. It was a spatial intelligence that engaged not just the mind, but the very body, using architecture to conduct emotion through the air. The evidence is both precise and magical. At the Mayan pyramid of At, if you stand at the base of the grand staircase and clap your hands, the echo that returns is not a dull thud. It is a sharp, chirping cascade that uncannily mimics the call of the revered Quetzal bird. This was no accident of stone. The step terraces of the pyramid were designed as a diffraction grating for sound waves, breaking the clap into a series of rapid reflections that create that specific avian cry. The builders engineered an auditory symbol, making the spirit of the feathered serpent god literally audible to the below. Across the ocean in the grand theaters of ancient Greece, the principle was one of stunning clarity. The semicircular arrangement of stone seats did more than just provide a good view. It functioned as a massive acoustic collector. A whisper uttered from the center of the stage, the orchestra, could be heard with perfect intelligibility in the very back row, dozens of meters away. This required a profound, if intuitive, understanding of sound wave reflection. The geometry of the theater caught the speaker's voice and focused it upward, while the stepped rows prevented sound-absorbing chaos. by providing orderly, hard surfaces for the sound to bounce. This mastery transformed drama from a visual spectacle into a visceral, shared auditory experience, ensuring that every tragic line and comic aside reached the entire community. Within the more intimate, multi-room complexes of palaces and temples, this acoustic intelligence served deeper social and spiritual purposes. Imagine a ruler addressing courtiers in a long, columned hall. By designing the ceiling vaults and wall angles with specific curvatures, builders could project that voice, making it seem fuller, more powerful, and more present, enhancing the speaker's authority without a single raised command. In ritual spaces, the goal was often transcendence. Certain burial chambers or inner sanctums were built with precise dimensions and selected materials to create resonant frequencies. A chant or a single struck note within such a room would not just be heard, it would be felt. The sound would linger, swell, and vibrate through the stone and the attendees, producing a sense of awe, of the space itself being alive and responsive. This was architecture as a musical instrument, tuned to the frequencies of ceremony. Achieving this required generations of experimentation. Builders learned that dense, smooth stone reflected sound brightly, creating clear echoes, while rougher surfaces or strategic openings could diffuse or dampen noise. They discovered that the shape of a room was its acoustic fingerprint. A long, narrow corridor would create a fluttering echo, a rapid succession of reflections. A domed chamber could focus sound to a single point, a whisper spot, where secrets could be shared with impossible clarity. This knowledge was applied with purpose. A labyrinthine palace corridor might be designed to distort and muffle sounds from the private quarters, preserving secrecy. A royal throne room, conversely, might be shaped to amplify the king's pronouncements, making his voice carry the weight of the walls themselves. This layer of planning reveals a holistic sensory philosophy. These builders did not see space as merely a container for visual objects. They understood it as a medium for experience, a canvas for light, a conduit for movement, and an instrument for sound. To shape a room was to shape the very atmosphere within it, to design not just what people saw, but what they heard and ultimately how they felt. The quietest ruins, then, are perhaps the most misleading. They were once filled with a carefully composed soundscape, a hidden architecture of echoes that turned ceremony into spectacle and speech into supernatural event. This immersive control leads us to a final, overarching wonder. How did this deep, multifaceted intelligence, this ability to think in systems of stone, sound, and society, simply vanish from the historical record? In so many places, the sound of a space was shaped by the very substance of its walls. This tangible layer of intelligence, the strategic use of materials, was as crucial to ancient planning as any geometric diagram. For these architects, stone, wood, and clay were not passive ingredients, they were active collaborators in the vision. The choice of what to build with dictated everything, from the grandeur of a room to its warmth, its strength, and even its spiritual resonance. It was a profound understanding of materiality, a dialogue between the gifts of the earth and the ambitions of the mind. Consider the revolutionary leap made possible by Roman concrete. Before this innovation, large interior spaces were constrained by the limits of stone and timber, requiring forests of columns to hold up heavy roofs. But Roman concrete, a mix of volcanic ash, lime, and rubble, could be poured into wooden molds to form immense, curving vaults and domes. This changed the very soul of interior space. The Pantheon in Rome stands as the ultimate testament. Its vast, coffered dome, spanning over 43 meters, creates a single breathtaking volume. The eye is drawn irresistibly upward to the central oculus, an open eye to the sky. The material did not just allow a big room, it enabled a new kind of spatial experience, one of overwhelming unity and celestial connection. The concrete was both structure and atmosphere, its very composition making the impossible interior a reality. In a very different landscape, facing a different kind of threat, the Hittite architects of ancient Anatolia developed their own material genius. Their palaces, built in a region prone to severe earthquakes, employed a technique known as timber-laced masonry. They would construct walls of stone and brick, but within those walls, at regular intervals, they embedded horizontal beams of wood. This created a flexible skeleton within the rigid stone. When the ground shook, the wooden lattice would absorb and distribute the seismic forces, allowing the structure to sway and settle rather than shatter. This material choice directly enabled complex, multi-room palaces to rise and endure. It was a risk mitigation strategy built into the fabric of every wall, allowing for architectural ambition in a volatile world. Beyond structure, materials communicated hierarchy and shaped daily experience. A builder's selection sent a clear message. In Egyptian temples, the innermost sanctuaries, the holiest rooms where the statue of a god resided, were often built from polished red granite or black basalt, rare hard stones that gleamed in the dim, filtered light. Walking from a sandstone courtyard into a chamber of luminous, dense stone was a sensory journey into the sacred. Conversely, storage magazines and service areas were typically built of rough or undressed stone, their material announcing their utilitarian purpose. This tangible language extended to practical comfort. The thickness of a wall, determined by its material, was a primary climate control device. Thick or rammed earth walls in hot, arid regions acted as thermal batteries, soaking up the daytime heat and slowly releasing it during the cool night, stabilizing interior temperatures. In cooler climates, the insulating properties of timber or certain stones helped retain warmth from hearths. The very proportions of a room were often a negotiation with material limits. The span of a ceiling was dictated by the length of available timber beams, making wide rooms a statement of both wealth and logistical mastery. This deep, intuitive knowledge of material behavior was passed down through generations of craftsmen. It was an intelligence born of hands-on experience, of watching how local clay cured in the sun, of knowing which forest yielded the most resilient beams, of understanding how different stones echoed sound. The planned space was never an abstract diagram, it was a prediction of how materials would perform, age, and feel. The cool touch of marble in a Roman atrium, the resilient flex of a Hittite palace wall during a tremor, the echoing solemnity of a granite vault, each was a calculated outcome. In this way, the spatial intelligence of antiquity was always grounded, literally, in the reality of the physical world, a masterful negotiation between human vision and earthly constraint. The choice of stone or timber was always a conversation with the land, and in few places was that conversation more profound than in the high desert of the American Southwest. Here, the ancestral people confronted an austere landscape of sandstone cliffs and sprawling mesas. Their response was not to conquer the terrain, but to listen to it, resulting in one of history's most eloquent examples of place-based spatial intelligence. The multi-storied great houses of Canyon rise from the desert floor not as fortresses, but as orchestrations of community and cosmos, built from the very rock they stand upon. Their genius lies in a layout that feels both meticulously planned and organically grown, a physical dialogue between daily necessity and deep celestial belief. At first glance, the footprint of a great house like Pueblo Bonito can seem bewildering. Hundreds of rooms stack in curved, terraced blocks, embracing a central plaza. But this is not chaos. It is a deliberate D-shaped design, a semicircle of living spaces opening to the south. This form was far from arbitrary. The curved back wall often aligns with the dramatic cliff face behind it, anchoring the structure to the permanent features of the earth. More astonishingly, the straight front line of this D-shape and the orientations of interior walls and key windows are precisely aligned to solar and lunar cycles. A single shaft of sunlight might pierce a perfectly placed window only on the winter solstice, illuminating a specific niche on a far wall. The architecture itself became a calendar, marking the passage of seasons and the turning of the year with silent, solar precision. This celestial alignment was not an abstract decoration. It was a foundational act of planning that tied the community's rhythm directly to the cosmos, ensuring their world was in harmony with the greater universe. Within this cosmically ordered shell, the planners performed a masterful integration of function and symbol. The most striking feature is the kiva, a large, circular, subterranean room used for ceremonies and gatherings. Dozens of these kivas are seamlessly integrated into the rectangular grid of the above-ground room blocks. This is the spatial intelligence of blended worlds. The rectangular rooms, used for storage, craftwork, and family living, represent the secular daily life of the community. The circular kiva, entered from above via a ladder, represents the sacred, the place of emergence from the underworld according to belief. By weaving these circular sacred spaces directly into the fabric of the rectangular domestic complex, the architects made a profound statement. The sacred was not separate, compartmentalized in a distant temple. It was embedded, literally at the heart and under the floor of everyday existence. You moved from a room for grinding corn across a plaza and down into the kiva for a ritual. The boundary between the spiritual and the practical was a doorway, not a canyon. This design facilitated a sophisticated social rhythm. The great houses were not palaces for an elite few, but communal hubs. The large central plaza and the great kivas could host hundreds of people for seasonal ceremonies, trade fairs, or communal decision-making. Yet, radiating from these public spaces were clusters of smaller, interconnected rooms, suites that likely housed extended families, offering privacy and a sense of domestic intimacy. The architecture managed scale brilliantly, allowing for massive collective gatherings while preserving the smaller, quieter circles of family life. Perhaps most tellingly, these complexes were rarely built in a single campaign. Tree ring dating reveals that rooms were added incrementally, over decades and sometimes centuries. A new room for a growing family, an additional storage level after a good harvest, an extra kiva for a ceremonial society. The building grew like a living organism, its expansion mirroring the growth and changing needs of the community itself. This was spatial intelligence with a long memory, a plan that was both stable and adaptable, respecting the original celestial orientation while allowing for organic, generational change. The result was a habitat of stunning sustainability and spiritual anchorage. In a harsh desert environment, the thick sandstone walls provided thermal mass, cool in the scorching summers and retaining warmth from hearths during cold nights. The layout created sheltered plazas and strategic shade. Every choice, from the alignment to the sun to the use of local materials, minimized the community's struggle against the environment and maximized their partnership with it. The great house was not just a place to live, it was a place to live meaningfully. It oriented its inhabitants in space, time, and belief. It told them where they were, through its connection to the cliff and canyon. It told them when they were, through the solar markers in its walls. And it told them who they were, a community whose daily life and deepest ceremonies were woven into the same architectural tapestry. This is perhaps the ultimate expression of ancient spatial intelligence, a system of planning so complete that it provided not only shelter for the body, but a home for the entire worldview of a people. The silent stones of a palace were never truly silent, for they were filled with the quiet hum of administration. This marks a crucial evolution in spatial intelligence, where architecture began to serve not just gods or kings, but the very machinery of the state itself. In the river valleys of Mesopotamia and Egypt, as kingdoms grew into empires, a new kind of complexity emerged: bureaucracy. And this bureaucracy demanded a new kind of building, one designed not for ceremony alone, but for the meticulous, relentless work of control. The palace was no longer just a home and a temple, it was becoming the central processing unit of an ancient civilization. The need to track harvests, tally tributes, manage labor, and record laws created an avalanche of information. This information needed a home, a secure, organized, and efficient home made of clay and papyrus. So architects were tasked with a novel challenge: to design spaces that could manage the flow of data as carefully as they managed the flow of people. The result was the birth of specialized room typologies born purely from administrative necessity. Walk through the ruins of a Mesopotamian palace complex, and you will find unmistakable archive rooms. These were not grand halls. They were often modest, secure chambers lined with shelves, where thousands of cuneiform tablets, records of grain, livestock, and legal contracts were stored in meticulous order. Nearby, you would find the scribal offices, workspaces with good light and surfaces for writing, where teams of clerks translated the physical wealth of the kingdom into lines of indelible script. The spatial layout had to facilitate a literal workflow. Goods arrived at fortified gatehouses and were taken to vast, guarded storage magazines. From there, officials would measure and assess them, then carry the tallies to the scribes for recording. Finally, summaries and reports would travel to the administrative halls where overseers and viziers made decisions. The building's floor plan became a physical map of this informational pipeline. Corridors connected these specialized nodes, not for grand processions, but for the efficient movement of tablets and officials. Doors were placed to control access, ensuring that sensitive records were not vulnerable. Light wells were positioned to illuminate workspaces for hours of detailed writing. This was spatial intelligence in service of organizational logic. The architecture was the physical hardware, the desk, the filing cabinet, the secure server room for the software of early-state bureaucracy. Every room had a defined purpose in this data processing chain. A storage room's location was calculated for security from theft and ease of inventory. A scribal office's placement balanced quiet concentration with proximity to both the warehouses and the administrators who needed the reports. This planning optimized the nascent processes of governance, turning the chaotic influx of goods and people into orderly, actionable knowledge. The building itself became a tool for economic management and political control. By centralizing records in a secure, purpose-built complex, the state its power. It could not just claim authority, it could demonstrate it through its flawless architectural memory. A farmer's debt, a merchant's tax, a soldier's ration, all were given a tangible, permanent home within the palace walls. This transformed the relationship between ruler and ruled. Control was no longer exercised only through spectacle or force, but through the quiet, pervasive efficiency of a well-organized building. The spatial intelligence here is profoundly modern in its ethos. It is about workflow, security, accessibility, and information management. It reveals that the greatest structures of antiquity were not just monuments to power, but the very engines that made that power possible on an imperial scale. The next time you walk into an office building, with its cubicles, its meeting rooms, and its server halls, consider that you are walking in a direct, if distant, descendant of those ancient archive rooms. The need to build a machine for thinking, for remembering, and for governing is a thread that connects us across. But what happens when this drive for order and control extends beyond a single palace and seeks to organize the very soul of an entire city? That administrative machine, however, could not function without a single, vital resource. In countless ancient societies, the most powerful driver of spatial planning was not a king or a god, but water itself. Its control and distribution sculpted multi-room complexes from the ground up, transforming buildings into sophisticated, integrated water management systems. This was spatial intelligence in its most pragmatic and essential form, where the luxury of a bath or the simple necessity of a drink dictated the very blueprint of daily life. The architects of these structures had to think like hydraulic engineers, mastering gravity, storage, and sanitation long before they ever considered aesthetics. Rooms were not placed for views or prestige alone, but were positioned in a precise, unbreakable relationship to water sources and drainage paths. The building's layout became a physical diagram of its own survival. In the sumptuous Roman villa, this relationship was elevated to an art form. Here, intricate networks of lead and terracotta pipes snaked beneath mosaic floors, fed by distant aqueducts or vast underground cisterns. This plumbing did not serve a single room, it orchestrated an entire domestic experience. Specific rooms were designed around water, from the heated chambers of the bathhouse with their hot pools and steam rooms, to the efficient latrines with running water for cleanliness, to interior courtyards centered on bubbling fountains that cooled and refreshed the air. The spatial program of the villa was in many ways a program of water use. The placement of the kitchen, the baths, and the latrines were all calculated points on a hidden hydraulic map, ensuring a constant, reliable flow from source to use to waste. This was not an afterthought. It was the foundation of Roman comfort and civic pride, a utility-first approach that created unparalleled luxury. In a far more arid landscape, the Nabatean architects of Petra faced a starker, more urgent version of the same challenge. Their magnificent tombs and palaces, carved directly into rose-red cliffs, were masterpieces of water harvesting in a desert. Here, the spatial intelligence is written in the rock itself. Elaborate systems of channels, dams, and cisterns were carved into the cliff faces and canyon walls long before the living quarters were ever outlined. These features collected every precious drop of seasonal rainfall. The placement of rooms, courtyards, and even entire was then dictated by the path of this captured water. A grand courtyard might be positioned to channel runoff into a subterranean cistern beneath it. Living spaces were often oriented to benefit from the cooling effect of a nearby water channel or a strategically placed basin. The building literally grew around its own water supply, its beauty and its function born from the same act of preservation. This hydraulic necessity required a comprehensive, almost intuitive understanding of the spatial envelope. Builders had to visualize the entire water cycle within the confines of their structure. They calculated slopes for channels cut into floors or walls to ensure proper flow by gravity alone. They designed storage cisterns of precise volume to see a household through dry months, often placing them centrally to minimize the distance water had to be carried. They engineered drainage systems that prevented flooding and stagnation, protecting the very foundations of their homes. This turned each complex into a self-contained hydrological unit, a closed loop of capture, storage, use, and discharge. To walk through such a space was to move through a monument to foresight. Every doorway you passed, every room you entered, existed in its particular place because of a calculation about rain, slope, and thirst. This pragmatic intelligence reveals a profound truth about ancient planning. The grandest visions of power and ceremony were always built upon a bedrock of utterly practical problem-solving. The spatial arrangement we admire today was often the elegant solution to a fundamental question of life: how to bring the vital element of water into the heart of a home, and how to manage its journey through every room. Yet for all their mental modeling and celestial calculations, these master planners faced a final, formidable challenge. How do you take a vision held in the mind and etch it perfectly onto the unruly surface of the earth? They lacked our digital precision, our laser levels, our reams of detailed paper. Instead, they relied on a humble, brilliant toolkit, a collection of simple instruments that became extensions of their own profound understanding. The true magic lies not in the complexity of their tools, but in the sophisticated results they achieved with such elegant simplicity. To translate an abstract plan into a city, you first need to measure. Across many cultures, this began with a knotted cord. A length of rope with knots tied at precise, standardized intervals became a flexible, portable measuring tape. A team of builders could stretch it taut across a foundation trench, using the knots to mark out consistent room dimensions or street widths. But measurement alone is not enough. You need straight lines and perfect angles. For this, ancient surveyors employed sighting poles. By planting 2 poles in the ground and aligning a third with them from a distance, they could project a perfectly straight across kilometers of terrain, establishing the primary axes of a temple or the boundary of a city wall. To ensure these lines were level, they used simple but effective water levels, a trough of water that reveals a true horizontal plane by the immutable law that water seeks its own level. And before committing to stone, they may have tested their ideas in 3 dimensions using malleable wax or clay, creating small-scale models to visualize proportions and spatial relationships. One instrument, however, stands out for its elegant precision: the Roman. This was the tool that built an empire's infrastructure. Imagine a vertical staff with a horizontal crossbar, from which plumb bobs were suspended on strings. A surveyor would plant the staff, then sight along the strings to create perfectly perpendicular lines. With a Roman engineer could lay out the relentless right-angled grid of a military camp or a new colonial town with unerring accuracy. He could stake out the Cardo and the north-south and east-west main streets, and from that cruciform center, plot every insula or city block with a geometric certainty that still defines urban landscapes today. The profound implication of these tools is a hidden layer of standardization. The consistent use of a knotted cord or a bronze ruler meant that societies had agreed upon universal units of measurement: a cubit in Egypt, a foot in Rome, a specific length that was known and replicated from one worksite to another. This allowed for the seamless coordination of thousands of laborers and the prefabrication of building components miles from where they would be installed. It speaks of a shared geometric language, a common understanding of basic principles like the 3-4-5 triangle method for creating right angles, knowledge that was practical, applied, and essential. Modern archaeologists and engineers have reconstructed these ancient tools and used them to replicate the planning of famous sites. The exercise is humbling. It reveals that achieving monumental precision required not just the tool, but immense skill, patience, and a deep, intuitive feel for the landscape. It was a fusion of empirical observation, watching the shadow of a pole with geometric rule, knowing the Pythagorean theorem in practice if not in name, and manual dexterity, keeping a cord taut and a sighting pole steady in the wind. This hands-on intelligence reminds us that sophistication is not always synonymous with complexity. The greatest spatial outcomes in history arose from straightforward instruments wielded by masters who understood both the rule and the material world. Their genius was in knowing how to see the perfect angle in a dangling string of lead, and how to trust that vision enough to build a world upon it. The tools left behind are only part of the story. To truly understand the spatial intelligence of the past, we must attempt a far more ambitious feat, reading the mind of the ancient architect. This is the profound goal of cognitive archaeology, a field that treats the built environment not just as a collection of ruins, but as a fossilized thought process. It asks a thrilling question: can we reconstruct the mental blueprints, the problem-solving strategies, and the very cognitive maps that guided hands to shape stone? The answer begins with a meticulous analysis of patterns. Researchers like Dr. Collin look beyond what was built to study how it was built. They examine the subtle fingerprints of thought left in the architecture itself. Perfect symmetry in a floor plan is not merely aesthetic, it is evidence of a preconceived geometric ideal held firmly in the planner's mind. The relentless repetition of a room module across a city speaks to a powerful shared mental template, a cognitive shortcut that allowed for complex systems to be built from simple, reproducible parts. Even the evidence of error correction, a wall that was started and then realigned, or a foundation trench that was dug wider than needed, becomes a precious clue. These are moments where we catch the ancient mind in the act of problem-solving, adjusting the abstract plan to meet the stubborn reality of the ground. By piecing together these patterns, cognitive archaeologists build inferences about the underlying mental toolkit. Did the planners use a form of modular thinking, assembling grand visions from standardized mental blocks? How did they conceptualize structural challenges, like distributing weight across a wide span, before the laws of physics were formally written? The layout of a building becomes a text to be decoded. The placement of a support pillar might reveal an intuitive understanding of load-bearing points. The consistent alignment of doorways along a single axis suggests a sophisticated ability to visualize and movement flows in 3 dimensions. This investigative lens moves us beyond mere description. We are no longer just cataloging rooms and corridors. We are attempting to walk the cognitive pathways that created them. It is a necessarily speculative endeavor, of course. We cannot interview the master builder of Knossos or survey the chief planner of Mohenjo-Daro. Yet by treating their architecture as the physical residue of thought, we open a window, however clouded, into the ancient mind at work. We begin to see the ruins not as dead stones, but as crystallized decisions, as moments of genius and adaptation frozen in time. This approach transforms every aligned wall and every repeated ratio from a static fact into a dynamic conversation, a silent argument between an idea and its execution, allowing us to listen in across the. That silent conversation between thought and stone took on a unique accent in every culture. To truly appreciate the diversity of this ancient intelligence, we can place 2 distinct dwelling types side by side: the Roman Insula and the Chinese. Both were brilliant solutions for multi-family living, yet they speak in completely different spatial languages, each shaped by a unique set of cultural priorities. The Insula was a product of the booming, crowded metropolis. As Rome's population swelled, land within the city walls became incredibly precious. The solution was to build upward. Insulae were multi-story apartment blocks, often rising 5 or 6 floors, constructed from brick-faced concrete. Their design was driven by an urgent, market-driven logic, how to house the maximum number of people on the smallest possible footprint. Rooms were stacked vertically around central light wells or narrow interior courtyards, which provided minimal light and air to the warren of small apartments within. The focus was sheer efficiency and density. The ground floor often housed shops opening onto the bustling street, with the more desirable, spacious apartments on the lower levels, and the cheaper, smaller, less safe rooms at the top. This was spatial intelligence applied to urban economics, a vertical organization of society by wealth and necessity. It created a vibrant, if often noisy and cramped, streetscape where commerce, craft, and domestic life were pressed tightly together. Now walk across the world and step through a single gateway in a traditional Beijing neighborhood. You enter the serene world of a courtyard house that embodies an opposite principle. Here, the world is not embraced but gently shut out. There is a single-story complex built on a rectangular plot, with all rooms arranged in a precise square around a central, open-air courtyard. The entire structure turns inward. Blank, windowless outer walls face the alleyways, prioritizing privacy and security. The courtyard itself is the heart, the family's private outdoor living room, a place for gathering, gardening, and enjoying the sky. This layout was not about density, but about order and harmony. It was a physical diagram of Confucian family hierarchy. The most important building, the main house, sat directly opposite the entrance on the north side, receiving the best sunlight and reserved for the family elders. Flanking wings on the east and west housed younger generations, while the southern building nearest the gate was for servants or guests. Every step into the complex was a step deeper into the family structure. Furthermore, the orientation and arrangement of buildings followed the principles of aiming to channel positive energy and achieve balance with the natural world. The spatial intelligence here served cosmology and social structure, creating a self-contained universe for the extended family. One form looks upward, compressing community into a vertical stack. The other looks inward, organizing family within a horizontal square. One is shaped by the pressures of the market and the scarcity of urban land. The other is shaped by the enduring values of familial respect, privacy, and cosmic balance. Both represent a masterful application of spatial reasoning to the fundamental human need for shelter and community. They prove there is no single correct way to think in rooms and walls, only different answers to the same eternal question: how shall we live together? The principles of the Insula did not vanish with their builders. They echo in the very streets and buildings we inhabit today, a silent conversation across. The spatial intelligence of antiquity is not a relic locked in a museum case. It is a living, breathing influence on modern architecture and urban planning. Contemporary designers and city planners actively study these ancient solutions, not as historical curiosities, but as brilliant, time-tested responses to problems we still face. They look to Roman hypocaust systems as early models of radiant heating, to the thermal mass of cliff dwellings for passive climate control, and to the harmonic proportions of Greek temples to understand why certain spaces simply feel right to the human spirit. This is not about copying old styles. It is about recovering a lost wisdom. At the heart of this rediscovery is a powerful idea: designing for human scale and experience. The ancient choreography of a processional pathway in Egypt or the intimate gathering space of a Minoan courtyard was all about shaping how people move and feel within a built environment. This principle is now central to modern urbanist movements that reject the impersonal, car-centric cityscapes of the 20th century. Movements like New Urbanism and Tactical Urbanism explicitly seek to recreate the walkable, mixed-use, community-oriented feel of historic towns and neighborhoods. They advocate for narrower streets that calm traffic, for buildings that meet the sidewalk with active fronts like shops and cafes, and for central public squares that function as modern agoras. In essence, they are trying to rebuild the ancient understanding that a city is for people first, a network of social spaces, not just a machine for efficiency. We can even hear the distant echo of ancient zoning in our own municipal laws. The clear separation of sacred, royal, and industrial zones in a Mesopotamian palace complex finds its counterpart in modern regulations that separate heavy industry from residential areas, or that create dedicated commercial districts. While our reasons involve public health and property values more than cosmic order, the underlying spatial logic of organizing a complex society by function remains strikingly similar. It is a testament to a perennial need for order amidst the chaos of communal life. Perhaps the most urgent reason we look backward is to move forward sustainably. Our modern struggles with energy consumption, urban heat islands, and community fragmentation are driving architects to revisit ancient, passive solutions. The strategic orientation of a building to catch the winter sun and block the summer sun, so perfectly executed in Roman villas, is now a cornerstone of bioclimatic design. The use of local materials, like the sandstone of Canyon or the of the Indus Valley, is a guiding principle of sustainable architecture, reducing transportation energy and connecting a structure to its place. The ancient focus on courtyards and light wells for ventilation is being reimagined in modern buildings that use natural airflow instead of energy-hungry air conditioning. These are not primitive techniques. They are sophisticated adaptations to local environments, honed over centuries. By uncovering this deep spatial intelligence, we gain more than just historical insight. We gain a rich repository of proven ideas, a catalog of human ingenuity applied to the eternal problems of shelter, community, and meaning. It reminds us with profound humility that good design is often not about inventing something entirely new, but about rediscovering the fundamental principles of light, movement, and human interaction that our ancestors understood in their bones. Their legacy challenges us to ask whether our own buildings and cities are as thoughtfully crafted for the human experience as those silent, enduring stones. But the most profound stories were not just told, they were walked. Within the silent geometry of ancient rooms lay an entire library of myth, a narrative intelligence that used architecture itself as the storyteller. This was spatial design at its most symbolic, where a floor plan became a script and a doorway marked the turning of a page. The building was no longer a passive container for ritual, it was an active participant, guiding its inhabitants through a sacred story with every step they took. The journey through an Egyptian temple complex is the expression of this idea. You begin at the massive, decorated pylon gate, a threshold from the bustling, sun-drenched world of the living. Passing through, you enter the first open courtyard, a space still accessible to the public. But the narrative deepens as you move inward. You proceed into the hypostyle hall, a forest of towering columns where light is filtered and dimmed. The ceiling lowers, the space grows more confined, the air stills. Finally, you reach the innermost sanctuary, a small, windowless chamber shrouded in perpetual darkness. Here, in the most secluded space, rested the statue of the god. This architectural sequence was a deliberate, physical reenactment of the mythic journey from the profane, outer world toward the Holy of Holies, from noise to silence, from light to darkness, from the human to the divine. To walk this path was to perform the story of approaching a god, your very movement through the rooms reinforcing a cosmic truth with your body. This narrative logic extended far beyond grand temples into the heart of domestic life. Consider the Viking longhouse, a seemingly straightforward hall for living, feasting, and sleeping. Yet its layout was a map of Norse cosmology and social law. The central, long hearth was more than a source of warmth. It was the axis, the world tree Yggdrasil of the home, connecting the domestic space to the mythic realms above and below. The placement of seating around it was not random. The high seat, reserved for the chieftain or head of household, was often positioned in a specific spot, sometimes facing the door for defense, sometimes aligned with symbolic carvings. This seat was a throne echoing the god Odin's high seat, from which he could see all worlds. The benches along the walls, where the family and warriors slept and ate, reflected the hierarchical order of the clan and the gods in Asgard. Architecture physically ingrained the social and mythological order, making the story of their universe a daily, lived experience. You didn't just hear tales of the gods around the fire, you sat within a spatial representation of their divine hall. This is spatial intelligence as a powerful mnemonic device, a memory palace built not in the mind, but in stone and timber. For cultures without widespread literacy, architecture became the primary medium for encoding and transmitting essential knowledge. An initiate walking through a series of progressively more sacred rooms in a mystery cult wasn't just learning secrets, he was literally walking the path of enlightenment, each chamber representing a stage of spiritual understanding. The building itself taught the lesson. The twists of a labyrinthine corridor could symbolize the difficult journey of life or the afterlife. A sudden, brilliantly lit courtyard after a dark passage could represent revelation or rebirth. By moving through these spaces, the story was absorbed through the senses and the muscles, becoming an unforgettable part of one's being. This ensured that core cultural values, origin myths, and spiritual truths were not easily forgotten. They were built into the environment, passed down through generations not by scrolls, but simply by living within the narrative framework of the home, the temple, or the city. The walls whispered the old stories, and every daily chore became a verse in an epic written in space. A perfectly straight street can be a profound vulnerability. Our modern eyes, trained on grids and blueprints, often misinterpret the winding, seemingly haphazard layouts of some ancient sites as failures of planning, as evidence of a lesser intelligence. But this assumption shatters upon closer inspection. Take the formidable citadels of the Mycenaean Greeks, like or Mycenae itself. Their internal pathways twist and turn, their rooms cluster in asymmetric blocks, their approaches are deliberately convoluted. From a blueprint perspective, it looks messy. From the perspective of a warrior defending the gate, it is a masterpiece. Every narrow corridor became a killing zone, every blind corner an ambush point, every staggered wall a barrier to a charging force. This was not a lack of planning, it was planning of the highest order, where spatial intelligence was measured not in geometric purity, but in survival. The irregular layout was a direct, brilliant adaptation to the paramount need for defensibility, a three-dimensional puzzle designed to confuse and trap any invader who breached the outer walls. It represents a fierce, pragmatic intelligence born from constant threat. Similarly, the ancient, layered streets of Jerusalem's Old City do not follow a Roman grid. They coil and climb, fork and narrow, following the brutal contours of the hills, tracing paths worn by centuries of pilgrims, merchants, and residents. This is not chaos, but a palimpsest of deep contextual intelligence. The plan emerged organically, responding year by year, century by century, to the immutable facts of the terrain, the location of sacred springs, the need for shade, and the patterns of daily life. It is a plan written by countless footsteps, not a single surveyor's line. To call it irrational is to miss the point entirely. Its intelligence is one of accumulation and resilience, of a community in constant dialogue with its environment, adapting incrementally to countless small pressures over generations. This reveals a crucial truth: spatial intelligence is not a universal formula. It is culturally specific, shaped by a society's deepest fears, its most sacred beliefs, and its daily negotiations with the real world. What looks like disorder to us might be the most elegant solution to a problem we no longer face. A winding street mitigates erosion on a steep slope. A clustered, inward-facing village layout protects against harsh winds. An irregular plaza might accommodate an ancient, venerated tree or a rock formation considered sacred. The intelligence here is opportunistic and responsive. It works with the land, not against it. It prioritizes immediate, human-scaled functionality and social cohesion over abstract ideals of order. These environments possess a complex, emergent functionality that a top-down design might never achieve. They are ecosystems of stone, growing and adapting. This challenges our very definition of smart design. It asks us to value resilience as much as regularity, and to see adaptation as a form of genius equal to conception. The messy, lived-in plan teaches us that sometimes the most intelligent structure is not the one imposed from above, but the one that grows from within, shaped by the relentless, intelligent force of life itself. That messy, resilient intelligence was not stored in libraries, but in the hands and voices of the people. For this deep spatial knowledge to leap across generations, it required a living vessel, a human chain of memory and skill. Without formal academies or printed manuals, ancient societies perfected a different kind of information network, one built on trust, ritual, and shared practice. The craft guild and the oral tradition were the unsung hard drives of the ancient world, safeguarding the blueprints of civilization not on parchment, but in the very rhythm of work and song. Think of a master mason standing before a rough block of stone with his apprentice. He does not pull out a detailed diagram. Instead, he might recite a rhyming couplet that encodes the ideal proportions for an arch. He places the young man's hands on the mallet and chisel, guiding the strike that will find the stone's natural cleavage point. This was knowledge passed from body to body, a curriculum of muscle memory and whispered secrets. The guild system formalized this transfer. A young boy would enter as an apprentice, spending years performing menial tasks while absorbing the culture of the workshop through sheer immersion. He would listen to the debates over which quarry yielded the best lime, watch the careful mixing of mortar, and memorize the sequence for laying a foundation. He learned not just how to build, but how to think like a builder, developing that spatial intuition through constant, corrected practice. The consistency we see in architectural styles over vast stretches of time is the ultimate testament to this system's power. Consider the soaring Gothic cathedrals built across Europe over 3 centuries. From Chartres to Canterbury, they share a family resemblance in their pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses. This was not because a single architect designed them all, but because guilds of stonemasons traveled from site to site, carrying a shared body of rule-based knowledge. They possessed secret geometric tricks, like using the shape to lay out a cathedral's floor plan, knowledge guarded within the guild but consistently applied. This created a technical language so precise that a master from France could communicate with a master from Germany through the geometry of a template and a shared understanding of load and thrust. Crucially, this knowledge was often encoded in non-written forms to make it memorable and sacred. Builders' rules were embedded in songs that set the rhythm for a work crew. Myths and origin stories for a clan or city often contained hidden instructions about sacred alignments or the symbolic meaning of certain spaces. Ritual procedures for laying a cornerstone or raising a roof beam were not merely ceremonial, they were vital checklists, ensuring each critical step was performed correctly and in the right order, reinforcing the process through repetition and solemnity. This turned construction into a kind of performed knowledge, where to enact the ritual was to remember the technique. This mode of transfer had profound implications. It favored experiential, incremental innovation over sudden, theoretical revolution. A master might refine the shape of an arch over a lifetime of trial and error, and that slight improvement would then be passed to his apprentices, slowly optimizing the form across generations. It meant spatial intelligence was a collective, living tradition. No single person held all the knowledge, it was distributed across the guild, held in the memory of elders, the skill of the carvers, and the songs of the laborers. This created immense resilience. Even if war or disaster destroyed written records, the knowledge could survive in the practiced hands of those who fled, ready to rebuild. The system ensured continuity, weaving cultural identity directly into the very fabric of cities and temples. To learn the craft was to learn the worldview, to inherit not just a set of skills, but an entire way of seeing and shaping the world. The stones themselves became the final, silent apprentices, bearing the imprint of 1,000 taught hands. The silent stones we have walked among were shaped by a wisdom modern science is only beginning to decode. What if the intuitive rightness of an ancient courtyard or the calming clarity of a processional path was not just cultural tradition, but a deep biological truth? Interdisciplinary research is now revealing that the finest ancient architects were, in essence, pioneering behavioral scientists. They crafted environments that worked in profound harmony with the human mind and body, long before we had the vocabulary to explain why. Environmental psychology offers a compelling lens. Studies consistently show that certain spatial qualities have a measurable impact on our well-being. Rooms with specific proportions, often those based on natural ratios like the golden section, are perceived as more beautiful and induce lower levels of stress. The strategic use of natural light, so carefully managed in Roman atriums or through Minoan light wells, is now known to regulate our circadian rhythms, boost mood, and improve focus. When an ancient builder oriented a room to catch the morning sun, they were not just following the gods, they were intuitively engineering a healthier, more harmonious interior climate for its inhabitants. This scientific validation extends to our innate need for nature, a concept biologists term. This is the hardwired human desire to connect with living systems and natural forms. It explains with elegant simplicity why interior courtyards, gardens, and water features were not mere luxuries, but central to so many ancient multi-room plans, from the Roman villa to the Chinese. These were not just aesthetic choices, they were psychological necessities. Bringing a slice of the natural world into the heart of a domestic or ceremonial complex reduced mental fatigue, fostered relaxation, and provided a vital sense of connection in densely built environments. The ancient planner who centered a home around a garden was effectively prescribing a dose of therapy for everyone who lived there. Furthermore, cognitive science sheds light on the navigational genius of legible ancient cities. Our brains create cognitive maps, mental models of our surroundings that rely on clear landmarks, distinct pathways, and coherent structure. Hierarchical street networks of Mohenjo-Daro, or the axial spines of Egyptian temple complexes, provided exactly this kind of legibility. They created environments that were intuitively easy to understand and navigate, reducing the cognitive load and disorientation that comes from chaotic, unstructured spaces. A clear processional path, or a recognizable central tower, acted as a powerful anchor in the mental map, allowing both residents and visitors to move with confidence and purpose. This was not just about getting from point A to point B, It was about creating a sense of psychological security and belonging within a vast complex. When these insights from psychology, biology, and neuroscience converge, they paint a remarkable picture. They suggest that the most enduring spatial solutions from antiquity succeeded because they aligned with fundamental, universal aspects of human nature. The ancient master builder, through observation, trial, and the slow accumulation of generational knowledge, learned what kinds of spaces made people feel safe, focused, awe-inspired, or at peace. They learned that a view of greenery aided recovery, that a certain ceiling height encouraged quiet reflection, and that a clear visual connection to the sky fostered a sense of openness even in a crowded city. This interdisciplinary validation does not diminish their achievement, it elevates it. It moves us from seeing these plans as merely clever or symbolic to understanding them as deeply human-centered. The best of ancient spatial intelligence was a form of pre-scientific empathy, a profound attunement to the unspoken needs of the human experience. It reminds us that the most advanced design is often that which feels the most naturally, effortlessly right, because it speaks directly to our oldest instincts. This revelation forces a pivotal question about our own modern world and what we may have lost in our pursuit of pure efficiency. These intuitive designs are now meeting the precision of the modern laboratory. The future of uncovering this lost intelligence lies not only in trowels and brushes, but in lasers and algorithms. We are entering a new era of discovery, where digital archaeology provides a powerful new lens to see the invisible frameworks of the past. Imagine a technology that can peer through dense jungle canopy to reveal the ghostly footprint of a city untouched for 1,000 years. That technology is LiDAR, light detection and ranging. Mounted on aircraft, it fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring how long each pulse takes to bounce back, it creates an incredibly detailed three-dimensional map of the Earth's surface, filtering out the trees to expose the subtle mounds, platforms, and roadways hidden below. Across Central America, LiDAR has revolutionized our understanding of the Maya, revealing vast, interconnected urban networks with precise ceremonial centers, agricultural terraces, and defensive walls, all laid out with a spatial logic we are only beginning to comprehend. It allows us to see the ancient planner's canvas in its full, breathtaking scale for the very first time, showing grids and alignments that ground surveys could never have detected. But what happens once we have that digital map? We step inside. Through advanced three-dimensional modeling and virtual reality, these silent ruins are being reborn as dynamic spaces. Archaeologists and software engineers collaborate to build painstakingly accurate reconstructions of multi-room complexes, from a humble Roman apartment to the sprawling palace of Knossos. These are not artistic guesses, they are data-driven models that incorporate everything we know about materials, dimensions, and construction techniques. This digital resurrection is transformative. Wearing a VR headset, a researcher can literally walk through these ancient halls at human scale. They can test long-held theories in real time. Does that window actually illuminate the altar at dawn on the summer solstice as hypothesized? They can simulate it. How did sound carry from the throne room to the outer courtyard? They can model the acoustics. How efficient was the traffic flow from the kitchens to the Great Hall during a feast? They can simulate crowd movement. This turns the static ruin into an interactive laboratory. We are no longer just observing from the outside. We are experiencing the space as the ancients intended, allowing us to feel the intended psychological impact of a long, dark corridor opening into a sunlit courtyard, or the awe of a processional pathway. This immersive experimentation leads to profound new questions, and often surprising answers that challenge our textbook assumptions. Beyond immersive experience, computational analysis offers a more abstract but equally powerful tool. By feeding vast amounts of architectural data into sophisticated algorithms, researchers can detect hidden geometric patterns, proportional systems, and even the precise sequence of construction, layer by layer, that are invisible to the human eye. A computer can analyze the angles of every wall in a city and find a recurring mathematical ratio that eluded generations of scholars. It can compare thousands of floor plans across a civilization to identify the core modular unit that underpins them all. It can even simulate stress points in a structure to understand how the builders intuitively solved engineering challenges. These digital tools act as a new set of senses, extending our perception into realms of pattern, number, and physics that the original builders understood implicitly. They allow us to experiment with ancient designs in ways never before possible, running countless virtual scenarios to see which layout best manages light, heat, or movement. This is not about replacing traditional archaeology, but about deepening it, adding a vibrant, dynamic layer to our understanding. We are pushing the boundaries of historical imagination, transforming our relationship with the past from one of distant observation to one of active, empathetic exploration, rediscovering the cognitive processes of the ancient world one laser pulse and one line of code at a time. The silent algorithms of ancient stone hold up a mirror to our own world. We have wandered through palaces that were celestial calendars, cities that were self-cleaning machines, and homes that were maps of the universe. We have seen how a straight line drawn toward the sun could organize an empire, and how a simple, repeated room module could build a civilization. This is the landscape of a profound and multifaceted intelligence, one where geometry met cosmology, where sociology directly informed layout, and where an intimate knowledge of materials shaped every human experience within. These planners thought in systems long before the word was coined, weaving principles of orientation, hierarchical zoning, and modular repetition into environments that were not merely functional, but deeply meaningful. They built spaces that sustained communities, enforced social bonds, and connected daily life to the grand narratives of the cosmos. This exploration does far more than satisfy a historical curiosity. It humbles our modern assumptions about progress. We often equate advancement with complexity, with more wires and more buttons. Yet these ancient solutions reveal a different kind of sophistication, one born from elegant simplicity, deep observation, and a holistic understanding of the human condition. They offer us a rich, largely untapped legacy of sustainable and profoundly human-centric design. Their buildings collaborated with the sun and the wind, used local materials, and prioritized communal well-being and psychological comfort in ways we are only now relearning. So the next time you walk through your own home, consider the invisible logic of its layout. Why is the kitchen where it is? How does the light move through the rooms at different hours? When you navigate your city, notice how its streets guide or hinder you, where people naturally gather and where they seek quiet. The spatial intelligence of the past is not locked away in ruins. It is a living conversation about how we shape our world and, in turn, how that world shapes us. Let this knowledge inspire a deeper, more observant appreciation for the built environment, both past and present. See the modern office building as a descendant of the administrative archive, the public park as our shared courtyard, and the thoughtful placement of a window as a quiet homage to an ancient understanding of light and life. If this journey into the mind of ancient architects resonated with you, please subscribe for more explorations into the world's great historical mysteries. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Which ancient structure's hidden intelligence fascinates you the most? Share your reflections in the comments.